So recently I did a demo around some Power Platform stuff, and I started to think, oh, this is actually an interesting demo. So let's see if we can take it one step further. And what I try to do is I try to read books, and probably, well, not the only one. The only thing is that when I read a book and like 2 or 3 months later, I totally forgot that I've read the book. So I was looking around the solution. Hey, can I get some cues or triggers that I should read more, or should be, well, at least notified that I've read something, maybe get some inspirational quote or something like that. And apparently there is this app where you can provide the app with what you've been reading, and then you get triggers or reminders. Okay, hey, you've read this. Can you remember who wrote this? Can you remember a quote from what book it is? So I start thinking, okay, this is actually an interesting scenario. So I figured out, okay, I keep all my reading, I keep that in Goodreads. And what I did is I simply synced what I've got in Goodreads to a SharePoint list. Now, within the SharePoint list, you'll see that I've got some books and authors, date, read, rating. So some normal, let's say, metadata around the books that I've been reading. This is just a bunch of metadata. There is no fancy logic in there. I didn't do anything with all the cool stuff that you can do with list formatting. It's just plain content. Now, I figured what I wanted to do is I want to get a reminder around something that I've read recently, let's say every week, or maybe once or twice a month, something like that. So I figured, okay, let's see if I can get a flow that sends me a reminder. Now, going from there, I currently editing flow. So I created a reading reminder flow, and what a flow does is it is pretty straightforward, but there are a few fancy things in there that make it fun. So first thing is, okay, I'm gonna run it every week, Wednesday, good moment to reflect on how the week is going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get an item from my reading list. I use a random integer, so I at least get some resemblance of a random book in the list that I have. And with that item, I now have my book. I have some metadata around the book. And what I do is I run an HTTP trigger to get some additional information, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to quiz myself. So now I got my book, I know who wrote it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call an API where I say, okay, search an API for all authors that have the same name. So I pick the author that I've that written my book, and then I pick his first name or her first name, and then query for other authors out there. And potentially you get a lot of results, but let's bear with me. So you get some results, you get some different authors that you can work with, and what you then can do is then you can say, okay, I've got the book that I've read, I've got some additional info, and let's send myself a question. So can I remember who wrote it? Then in order to do that, you can work with adaptive cards, and we're going to have a look at the adaptive cards in a second. But the important part with adaptive cards is that you actually can ask questions in an adaptive card. So you can ask a user, okay, what is the option, or what do you want to provide as an option? So what I did is I created an array with 3 options, choice 1, choice 2, and the correct one. And the correct one has the author that is coming from my book, so coming from SharePoint. And the 2 other authors are actually coming from the API that I call. So I just get a random value or a random author from the list of authors that I get. Now, the second thing that I wanted to do, if I would ask this question like this, the third option is always going to be the correct option, because the third option in my array has the label correct. So that's not something that I wanted to do. What I want to do is I want to shuffle my array. I want to mix it up a bit, make sure that it's not always going to be the third option when I get my question. So what I do is I create a random integer between 0 and 2, so I get 3 options. And what I then do is, okay, let me randomize my book array. And in order to do that, I have a quite large function. So I put it here so it's a bit more readable. What I'm actually doing, I'm using the skip function. With skip, you can actually say, okay, give me everything after a certain starting point. So what I have is I have my random start, which is between 0 and 2. Then I'm going to get everything after that random start and everything before. And every time I run this, I will get a different random start. So I get sort of a random set of data. By using the union, you can then combine everything again, so you have a single array, which is sort of randomized. It's not 100% randomized because, well, I'm only doing specific options, but then in a way, I still have not always the third option. As a result, it's slightly different. Then the next thing is there is this adaptive card option, and the adaptive card is it's a JSON schema that you can use. So I didn't do too much time on designing or making it look pretty. The important part is that I make sure that I've got my title. There is some design around my title, so I make sure that it is bold. It's extra large. Then you have some text where I make sure, okay, you understand the question that you get. And then what you can do is you can actually provide the choices, the options that you want to send the user or present the user with. Now, if I would close this one, by then using the send adaptive card, I can say, okay, this is the message. This is my adaptive card. I can do an update message saying, okay, I'm happy with the result. And then I've got my recipient. That's going to be me. I'm going to get the question. Then what I can then do is, okay, I'm going to wait for that response. And if the response actually is correct, then I'm going to say, okay, you're the winner. And if I did something wrong, then okay, keep trying or try again. Or maybe you could do a link to the book that you've read saying, hey, perhaps you should read it again. Now, if I would run this, then what you will see is I'm going to run it manually. Click next, finish. 1, 2, 3. What you actually see, it will get the item, it will get the book info, it will go through all the different steps, and it will send me that message. So if I now go to Teams, you will see, okay, you read a book. Apparently, I read a Jack Ryan thriller. So, okay, who wrote it? Now, obviously, that's going to be Tom Clancy. I'm going to send submit, and then it will probably tell me that I did well. So, well done. Now, I would run it again. What I can do is, okay, let's say run it again, and you will see that if I give a wrong answer, then obviously I would get the wrong experience saying, okay, you did something wrong, please try again. So the only downside is that I now have 2 lead child, so I honestly have no clue what's the correct one. Sure, this one is wrong. And I will say, okay, well, you failed. Now, what I really liked around this sample is that it is pretty straightforward in steps that I need to take. I have a recurrence, making sure that it runs every week or every 2 weeks. I'll get a random book that I've read recently, and obviously I'm now querying my SharePoint list. I could also query my Goodreads feed, where I get all the data for, because Goodreads provides you with an XML feed of all the stuff that you've read. Then I get some additional info, make sure that I shuffle my answers, send myself an adaptive card, and then just work with the data. Now, let me go to my flows and let me go to my import, because I cheated a bit. I didn't want to run my import every time. If you actually wanted to play around with Goodreads, you'll need an HTTP trigger. But what you will see is that Goodreads is just a RSS feed. And what you then can do is, if you would go there, what you will see is it's plain XML. You get a bunch of data. Now, let me talk a little bit. So all the data that you actually need is already here. So instead of using SharePoint, if you don't want to use a SharePoint list as your storage layer, you could use this XML file as well. Just get the XML file with everything that you've read. And what you then can do is this one, I think. So the next step is that, okay, for each item in that XML, you'll need to work with XPath queries. So what I'm going to do is, okay, it's RSS. So let me select that one so it's a bit more readable. What you see is that, okay, I did an HTTP request, and I'm going to select all items in my HTTP or in my XML file. Then I'm going to create a SharePoint list item based on the item in my RSS feed. And in order to do that, what you can do is then you can just say, okay, in my for each, I'm going to create an item, and I'm going to do an XPath. Now this time I'm going to select my for each item, and then I'm going to say, okay, in this case, I want to get the item title and I want to get a text. Or if I want to get the author, then I can do the item author name. And this one actually matches with what you see here. So I've got my item element, then I've got an author name, I've got my title, I've got things like what I've given as a rating. I've got stuff that, okay, when did I actually read it? Because you could use dates to see when you read something. So it's a really easy way without having to write really complex code to send yourself cards, quiz yourself on what you've read or what you've been doing. And well, for me, it was a really I like the scenario of getting something in my team's environment that easy and that quick. I think I spent like an hour on getting the flow out there and doing some stuff with it. Probably spend another hour figuring out how to shuffle things, because it's a bit, well, it wasn't apparently a scenario that a lot of people do. You see a lot of samples out there that explains, okay, you can use an Azure function to shuffle. And well, I wanted to stay away from any development and wanted to play around with the flow only. And that's it. Let me see if there are questions.
There are lots of amazing chat and some questions in there, Appy. So thank you. Very, very cool. Really like how malleable and pliable this is, right? So you're using it for books, but someone could use it for videos or movies, or they could use it for, I don't know, Microsoft 365 community videos if you wanted to quiz yourself and keep up to date with those. I was even thinking I could tweak it to just remind my kids of all the chores that they didn't do and quiz them on things that they should be doing. So win-win, right? Excellent.
Work as well.
Yeah, very, very cool. Thank you so much.